and welcome to another episode of Sovereign Sisters Podcast. I'm Angela Atkins, your host, and tonight my write-up says I'm going to talk about Hidden Waters Farm and my trip back to it. But before I do, I really want to talk about what I've learned in the meantime. My trip to Hidden Waters Farm was a lot of fun. I spent the day with Joe Shaffer and his assistant Jacob, and I learned how the farm was run and I interacted with the farm animals. But I do want to talk about the other side of farming, the commercial side. Now, we briefly talked about this, Joe and I, in episode 26 about CAFOs, the concentrated animal feeding operations. That's an industrial agricultural facility where there are large numbers of animals, whether it's cattle or pigs or poultry, doesn't matter. It's the same concept. It's a huge number in a very small confined space, and they're raised their entire lives in that small area. It's done that way so that the operations maximize their production and minimize their costs, and it's efficiency rather than humanely treating the animals. They're confined in that small space, often indoors, where they're watered and fed and they're cared for on this large scale. So typically, they never see the sun or freely graze. There's a lot of issues with that. CAFOs, the term itself is defined by their high animal density, which leads to a number of other issues, and that's really my concern. It's not just the fact that they're shoved all together, but there are environmental concerns and there are truly animal concerns that are, to me, it's just inhumane. And I know they're animals, but we should treat them with kindness. These concerns that I have and are noted by many, some of them have to do with waste management, there's air and water pollution, and the well-being of the animals is really critical. They can suffer from stress, and of course that can cause disease, amongst other things. And this is due to those overcrowded facilities that they're in. They're crammed in there with nowhere to go. And think about it. If you lived in a situation where you had nowhere to go and you couldn't go outside and you're stuck together, it would be stressful and cause anxiety. And maybe that anxiety can lead to other things. And just normally we are not meant, not human, not animal, meant to live in a confined area without seeing the outdoor, without breathing fresh air, without seeing the sunshine. That's just not the way we're meant to live. So when you contrast that with the more sustainable or humane farming methods, such as the one that Joe practices in regenerative farming, it is important to understand that this is about animal welfare. And yes, we should be environmentally concerned as well. But our priority, I think, really has to be with humane treatment of animals. There are several drawbacks to CAFOs in addition to just the environmental and animal welfare. First off, think about it. They're all crowded into a big space. What do you do with all the waste? Those animals have to eliminate from their bodies. And so where does that animal waste go? It's in a concentrated area. Is it just hosed down and gone into the water system? So does that pollute the water in the nearby area? It can cause all sorts of downstream, and I don't mean that as a pun, but think about it. If it gets into the water system, then that can affect the water system of those living in the area. And that can grow pathogens in the water from these, whatever it is, that could be in the animal waste. So there are a lot of things to think about. Some of it is the air pollution, and it's not, people talk about, cows have methane. No, it's not just that. There is buildup from just that close contact. There can be ammonia and other things in the air, and it causes poor air quality, not only for the animals, but for the humans that have to care for the animals and for the local area. It's possibly that air pollution spreads outside of the CAFO itself. So I think that one of the things that people don't think about when you have that large of a production, it demands a lot of water resources. You've got to, hydrate these animals in order to keep them alive. So it can deplete local water resources. That's another issue to think about. I think maybe people don't think about just how not only inhumane, but how detrimental it can be to have a CAFO in your area. The animal waste, the water pollution, and that, again, what's the downstream effect of the water pollution? Not only does it cause the water to be polluted, but then the aquatic life in that water can also be decimated. They're unable to survive if they're living in unsanitary water. So it's a lot to be considering that CAFOs, in my opinion, should not be allowed. Those government subsidies that they get, I really think should be turned over to the regenerative farmer, that the CAFOs should go away in a, in a true world where we cared about one another and cared about our animals, that we put our time, effort, energy behind those things that create quality of life. Because these animals are in crowded conditions in CAFOs, there's a lot of physical injury, a lot of stress, and a lot of disease. And so what do? They give the animals antibiotics. Well, they not only give them when they're sick, but they do it to prevent sickness. So they're routinely being dosed with these things. And this is something that could lead to the development of antibiotic resistance. And that is not just an issue with the animal. Think about it. It's a public health risk because these animals that are being raised for food, they take the antibiotic, they are sent off to the slaughterhouse to be made into food for us. They come to us, and now we're ingesting the antibiotics that they had in their system. It's a direct correlation that if there's antibody resistance in the animal that we're eating, then it could potentially cause antibiotic resistance in us because we're eating their meat. So I think we have to consider that the use of antibiotics is not a great thing. And if they're being used just prophylactically, meaning before the animal gets sick, it's a lot of wasted effort in as far as the money, the antibiotic resistance that it's going to cause, and the downstream effects from that can in future, those antibiotics won't work for people who actually need them. There are some infections that truly need antibiotics to save lives. And if you have this antibiotic resistance in humans, then it's going to be more difficult to find the proper treatment because we're misusing those antibiotics. There's other issues to think about also. What about the quality of life in the area where these CAFOs are? They emit strong odors and pollution, and that's going to affect the quality of life who live nearby. Can lead to other issues like maybe the pollution causes respiratory illnesses, or at minimum, it can cause decreased property values. That is a real serious thing to think about. If somebody lives in that area, maybe they're a smaller farmer, that can potentially cause a economic downturn for them also. But bigger economic displacement is the fact that these CAFOs, because of their subsidies, because of their immense size, they outcompete the smaller, the traditional farms because they have a higher scale, typically, much more efficient practices because they can afford it, because many of them are receiving government subsidies. And so it leads to economic challenges for local family-run farms. And potentially that could ruin the entire rural communities. So it's another way of thinking how we need to look at this from a bigger perspective. It's not just, oh, poor cow living in close quarters. And some people just don't care, which is very sad to me. But I think you have to look at the bigger picture. It has such an impact, and it just goes across the board. If you do one thing, it's the ripple effect. And then it affects the people around it, the community around it, and potentially those people who need to raise their family, on the farm and make their money from it, lose out, and then they're displaced. So that's one thing to think about. I think for me, the ethical concerns are very disturbing. The conditions of CAFOs and the treatment of animals, they're focused on the money. That's really what it is. They're in high production, and it comes at the cost of the animal's welfare and how they would naturally behave in the world. And so for that, I find it to be a huge drawback. It really is, that I think it's time that we look at a different way of doing things and going back to, or starting again, regenerative farming. And there is growing criticism of these CAFOs. And I think there is much more interest in sustainable and humane farming practices, such as those employed by regenerative farming systems. And one of these things that came to me, and the reason why I wanted to start with this, is that Tucker Carlson recently had an interview with Casey Means, who is a Stanford educated surgeon, and her brother Callie, who is a lobbyist for pharma and then the food industry. They both discussed why they quit their jobs. They were in horror when they realized how many people were being killed by the systems they participated in. One of the stories they relate in a video I have for you pertains to the CAFO agricultural methods and its effect upon the food. Just take a listen.
That have all just started in the past 30 years are because of the toxicity of the food, not the food itself. All these foods, anything that we ate, 10,000 years ago that we're evolutionary made to eat is generally fine. It's what's been done to the food. So, pasture raised, which has just been beef for all of history up until like industrial
raising cows.
It's like that just means they're outside,
not getting poisoned,
raised as they know, they're eating grass. Now, most industrial farm meat, right, they're inside, they're, have cortisol because they're so stressed, and they're eating GMO corn and soy. That impacts their biology. So actually the factory farm meat has a much higher omega-6 content, whereas ones eating grass outside are omega-3, much more omega-3 fatty acids. Omega-6 is inflammatory, omega-3 is not. So actually, and again, we go through this in the book, but just being on a path of curiosity about this, eating food how it's meant to be made and meant to be raised, the actual biology and makeup of the food itself is different when it's factory farmed. So when you're eating a traditionally industrial raised meat, you're much more inflammatory items are going into your body. So you just always need to strive. That's why we do think, and there's problems with the organic designations, but as much as you can get away from the pesticides being spread on this food, as much as you can get to how the food has been raised, for all of history up until a couple, generations ago, because the way the food is manufactured and the stuff that is put on food is very corrupt. It's just not the case in other countries. So as much as you can get to how it's been made forever, the better. And that's why we say, and how if we were in charge of everything, I would fire and I truly mean this, I'm not joking, I'd fire every single nutrition scientist in the government. I'd stop every single, all this complicated nutrition guidelines. The point of the USDA putting out thousands of studies literally and all this guidance is to confuse people because they're bought off by the food companies. I'd replace it with one guideline, is that we need to, as a public policy matter, reduce ultra-processed food consumption among children.
So I hope you heard that clearly, that the whole point is to remove ultra-processed food from children. Well, it's not only children, it's from all of us. So you should really listen to the entire interview. I'll post the link to it with this description, because I really think this is one of the most impactful interviews I've heard in recent time about the state of the food industry and how it's involved with all the other industries. I mean, starting out, you'll hear about how the tobacco industry bought the food industry and how the food industry is involved with pharma. It's amazing to me, all this weave together. And that's why I entitled this podcast, Nurturing Animals, Elevating Food. This is about compassionate farming. This is what Hidden Waters is doing. And I hope you tuned in tonight for a heartfelt conversation that underscores the importance of kindness in agriculture and its ripple effects on our food plates. And I do encourage you, if you have any comments or you want to chime in, to please put it in the comments. Happy to have a conversation with you. I want to show you some of the stuff that that I saw on the farm. I took some video, I took some pictures, but let me show you how Hidden Waters really nurtures animals and elevates the food quality. This is compassion in action. What I discovered during my day on the farm was the profound connection between animal welfare and food quality. I want to highlight the gentle and humane practices of Joe Shaffer and his team that they employ daily. Now, I didn't tell Joe I was doing this follow-up. I just asked him for a tour, and he obliged. My husband and I went out there. He took us around on his little tractor, and we went from place to place, and we helped feed the animals, and we interacted with them. And it really was an experience that I treasure, because this is the kind of life we need to get back to. It shouldn't be all about bustling and hustling all over, growing up the corporate ladder and thing. We need simpler lives. We need to bring ourselves back to nature. We need to embrace everything that has been turned on its head. We need to look at living life more simply and enjoying it far more. Right now, I don't know how many people are enjoying going to work 9 to 5 or whatever, however many hours you go, because there's a lot to that disassociates yourself from nature. One of the things that I found so compelling is watching how Joe and his assistant treated the animals with respect and care. I observed firsthand how this approach reflected in the animals' calm demeanor, and it really creates a positive impact, not just on the animal, but on the farmer. I gained indelible insights into how compassionate driven farming truly makes a difference. Now, it doesn't matter if you're just a supporter of sustainable farming or simply curious about these practices and the impact it has on the food. If you have the opportunity for this type of experience, I think you should try and make it happen, because you'll be amazed how it offers. It's a heartwarming and it's an eye-opening perspective of how farming should be. I'm going to show you some videos of the animals that we were out, and bear with me because I'm going to try to talk to it, and I think the video is a little fast, so I'm going to probably stop in between and talk to it. So here we are. These are the baby chicks. They are just like 2 weeks old. We put new bedding down and fed them. Those red strips are the food, and they scuttered around like, oh, what's going on. But as soon as everything got down back in there, the chicks themselves laid out the bedding. They basically made it their home. It was amazing to watch them actually pat it down and get back into their little groove and start eating. And then the chicks will move here in a couple of weeks. These are the chickens that are, I don't even like to say what they're used for, but they're food, obviously. They're in these pens to protect them from the elements and from predators. Now, think about it. If a fox were to come around, they destroy all the chickens. So the chickens need to be in something that is going to keep them safe and something that's going to keep them from all the elements. They're, fed and watered every day. And the system is very simple. If you'll look in the picture on the right, you'll see that in the back, they're moving stuff out. Joe developed a system that's so simple where it's almost like a hand truck, but much bigger, that he puts right underneath the chicken pen, and he can just move the chickens with it. And he let me do it. It was so much fun. I actually moved a pen without losing one chicken. Not one escaped. It was so much fun. And the chickens seemed to be okay with it. Yeah, they cluck around and everything, but they calm right down and they go back to what they have. They get their food and water, and they are knowing they're getting fresh grass, fresh, soil, that they are going to, eating all the little bugs and critters inside, really makes their life better, because they get that new all the time. And in 2 weeks, they'll move again and they'll have fresh grass and fresh bugs and everything else. Then when those little chicks are, ready, they move along. This is the laying hens. I really like this because they are so entertaining. Let's put it that way. They get all excited when people come in. They're in this big trailer, and they get moved every 2 weeks also. The whole trailer gets pulled by a tractor, and the chickens are protected, and they just move to a new grazing area. And you'll see on the picture on the right with the new grass coming up, again, they too get the new grass and and bugs in the soil. And so they're really living a life where they constantly have new healthy growth. And it's because they have so much land, they can just keep moving it around, and new growth keeps coming. And just like in any other thing, moving on that grass, they're also doing their job in helping the soil regenerate and helping new grass grow. And life just keeps getting better and better because it keeps getting replenished. And then we moved on to what was my favorite part, the piggies. I love the piggies. Now, I've been around pigs before, and I've been to other farms that have had pigs. None like these pigs. You can just tell that they are so well cared for and they are so loved that they just relax and they lay down. Yes, they go lay in the mud to stay cool and everything, but if you look at them, they lay together, they snuggle up to one another. They're very friendly. They'll come and they'll take their snout and butt up against you. The one in the middle was so friendly, would just walk up and wait to be petted. I mean, it was like a pet pig. You would not think it was living on a farm, which is so interesting because most farms I see, pigs get very animated, if not a little feisty. These pigs were truly calm. That tells me they know that they're being cared for, they're being respected, and I think they're truly loved. So again, it was a great day, and that wasn't all that we did. But I think what I love about the being on the farms is the way they respond to what's going on around them. They find their own sense of peace because they're living the life I think they were called to live. And I know for many people, they find it difficult to realize animals are being raised for food. But I do think, it goes to the circle of life, and it is a fact of life. We lived for millennia in that type of environment where we went and hunted and ate animals, and this is part of living. And whether or not you approve of it, I think the point of it is to make sure that the animals have the best life that they can. But the main thing were the cows and the way they responded to their way of life. Now, I'm going to show you a video, and I apologize for the quality of video. It seems I probably need to upgrade my software and my skill set. As a health and nutrition coach, I'm not the frequent user of the software, so I will admit there's a little to be said for what it is. But let me show you the cows in the pasture.
You'll kind of go like that. But it's funny because they really do remember you. Like the fact that you had another person, they're more comfortable.
Shaking their head to me means they're going to come and stay.
But if you go through, you can see like we just wanted to see. So like you can tell the difference. But it just took a little bit, which is good. Since everything's so
Coming on.
just make this they know the routine, they know where the fence is, where they're going next. So they're just the one with the white face is looking at me like, what do you want? What are you doing here? What's up, big boys? Girls? Whoop. Come on.
I probably need some help with getting my video skills up. But it was a lot of fun. And what I know you couldn't hear the voices very well. It was outside. If you notice in the background and in the very beginning with the cows, that's the Baltimore Beltway behind where the cows are. The cows are living in the city practically, and they're very content because if you watch Joe and Jacob and how they move the cows, in that first instance, he was rolling out a reel. It's an electrified wire. It doesn't hurt them. That's when he does a little shake. It kind of gives them a buzz. They probably only have to do it once. So they know that they won't ever do it again. But they just rope off a section, and the cows know to move through those wires to the next section. And they called them. I don't know if you could hear clearly enough, but there was some whooping going on that they called the cows. And then that leader of the cows said, okay, I'm in charge. I'm going to show you what you need to do. And she starts up the hill, and the others follow. And they kind of, manage to get their way up and follow the path. And then they go grazing in the next field. And again, this is done twice a day by people who care about them. You saw how content they were. They were just like, okay, there wasn't any struggle. Nobody had to be forced or prodded or used any kind of implement to move them along, because they know what to do, because their people care for them. And so this was amazing to me to watch this, that I'm thinking, what a life. What does it mean that these animals, who I believe, if God put them on this earth to provide food for us, shouldn't we honor that? Shouldn't we honor that they are the creatures giving us life, because the products from their being will be the food for us that nourishes our cells. And then without that, we can't survive. And so while they're with us, I truly believe that we need to do everything we can to make them have a quality of life. And in addition to that, I believe that it shows in the food. Now, my husband and I are somewhat foodies. I don't mean that in a snobbish way, but because we're so into good food, and we make 90% of our own food. We rarely go out, and when we do, we can taste the difference in food. If you're not sourcing high quality food, we usually can taste it. And we notice that when we get the meat from Hidden Waters and we cook it, it has a depth of flavor that you can't get in typical restaurants. And for me, that's exactly why I think Joe does what he does. He knows what he's providing. He loves the animals. He cares for the animals, but he cares for his customers too. And so if every farmer, whether it's meat or produce or dairy or whatever, cared for what they're taking, what they're growing and raising to be food for humans, that you would have a higher quality of food, and the food wouldn't be dead. Literally, the CAFO animals, like it said in the Tucker interview, Callie had said, the meat that you're eating is dead because there's no quality of life when they've completely destroyed the animal's basic DNA by altering it with hormones and antibiotics and whatever else they use on these animals. They come out not being the type of animal that is going to produce quality food. And for that reason, I think it's really important to look at what regenerative farming does, because not only does regenerative farming mean for animals, but for plants and dairy and whatever else you have. I mean, we've got eggs on the farm. You've got happy chickens producing eggs every day. I think Joe said they're usually producing one egg a day. And I don't know if you noticed in the images that they had these little things that they could hop up on where they go lay their eggs. Joe says they're attracted to the color red. So he's got these red panels. They jump up, they go into them, and then lay their eggs. And I'm thinking, they like the color. They're happy with their location. They get new grass, every 2 weeks. They have humans that come in and talk to them and be with them and clean their water and make sure that they're okay every single day. They're not left alone. Yes, maybe you can't do this on a huge scale, but think of it this way. If every community had a regenerative farm, we wouldn't need CAFOs. We wouldn't. We need to go back to what we used to have, which was more of an agrarian society where in the community, the farmer was almost like the center of the community, and every person in that community raised something. If we all planted some anything, flowers, food, whatever, and we could exchange, I think we'd have a better way of life. Because if you love what you're doing, I mean, what's the saying? If you love what you're doing, you never work a day in your life. I think that's what Joe's doing every single day. He's not working. He's living his dream. He's with the animals, raising them in a way that he knows that they are cared for humanely, that they will have the best life ever. And yes, we discuss what happens when they're going to be taken away to be slaughtered for food. And it is sad. Joe has said there have been times that he has even cried over it. I get all emotional thinking about it. I said, there's no way I could do this. But I am grateful to those farmers like Joe that can do that, because not only does it show his commitment to regenerative farming and to the care and feeding of his animals, but it shows his commitment to his customer. He cares about his customer getting the best food possible. He cares about his community. He has events to bring his community in to learn about this. And so if you don't live in this area, find an area that has community, has a farm like this. I mean, he talks about learning from Joe Salatin at Polyface Farm in Virginia. If you can go there, check it out. It will be an experience I think you won't ever forget, because if you're not a farmer, you don't realize the commitment, the 7 days a week, 365-day commitment that you make to the animals, to the public. And yes, I'm certain you have people who help you, and so you're not maybe there, 24/7, but it is a commitment and a way of life. And I think that's one thing I look at and say, I spent way too many years in what I call corporate. I didn't like it while I was doing it. It felt wrong to me, but there wasn't another way at the time. A single mom raising kids, you have to do what you have to do. But as I look at it now, thinking, I can make what I want out of my life, why wouldn't I do something like this? Now, I'm not going to be a Joe at Hidden Waters. I don't want to do a commercial farm. But what about a small farm? What if I just start slowly? And then I'm in an area where I have a neighbor who wants to do something similar, and we work together, and then that expands. Wouldn't that make life so much better for people if they got together over food? If they got together over sharing the land, if they got together working together in harmony rather than this disharmony that's going on now, that people are so separated and things are so divided, find a way back. I think the answer is nature. Nature is the way back. If we find some common ground, literally, that we can work together in nature, whether it's something you feel you're not good at, but you can learn from somebody, or you're really good at and you're ready to share it with somebody. I think it's time that we look at this and we come up with a plan to take the world in a different direction. We can't continue the way we are. We just can't. The world is not going to be sustainable if we are not teaching each other, we're not sharing with each other, we're not having human interaction or interaction with nature, whether it's plants or animals or any birds, whatever. It doesn't matter. We need to get back to community. We need to get back to sharing. We need to get back to caring. And I really believe that the reason why I wanted to do this episode was because after that experience that I have at Hidden Waters, I wanted to emphasize just how the compassionate treatment of animals has such a positive impact, not only on the animals, but on the quality of food that they produce. Hidden Waters is the example of that. And I say that not as I'm not to, it's not a commercial. It's not promotional. It is strictly a heartfelt feeling that people need to understand that eating well is going to make us healthy. And if you go back to the Tucker interview, there's so much in there about our health. And I think that's really important that we look at. If we don't start eating well, we are going to die younger as we are. We're going to have more sickness, more disease or conditions that are going to shorten our lives and make them unhappy and not as fruitful. And I believe that the way back is us reconnecting with nature. I think that's the real importance here. And so for more than, I don't know, more than a decade, I've been preaching this stuff to my clients or anybody who would listen to me. If I was on a summit or doing some other podcast, I would say the same thing. You've got to eat high quality food. You can't eat dead food. And this ultra processed food that is what people think is their standard diet, going through drive-throughs or buying packaged food and just heating it up in a microwave. It's dead food. It's giving you no nourishment. It's keeping your body alive by simply having calories, and that's just a unit of energy. And those calories will only last so long. If your body doesn't get the nutrients, the minerals, the trace elements that it needs, it eventually will break down. It'll eventually not be a life you want to live because you will be unhealthy and it will be unhappy. Because without health, what do you have? You can have all the money in the world, but if you're not healthy, how can you use it? And so I think it's time to bring it back to being what we are meant to be. And I think we're meant to be keepers of the land, keepers of the animals, people who share with one another and live in community. And I can only hope that this is going to happen in the near future, that we don't have to wait years for this to happen, because we have had the last several years, many years, that feel like much longer, where there hasn't been any community, where there hasn't been any real compassion and caring and loving of one another, maybe in small pockets of people. But we need this to grow. We need this to grow throughout the world, not just locally, but you have to start where you are. So I encourage you, start where your community is. Even if you're the only one, be the example. Get out there, plant something, grow flowers, give them away, grow fruit or vegetables if you can, if you have the ability. If you have an abundance of them, give some away. Talk to people about getting in touch with nature. Talk about what the joy is of getting your hands in the dirt and feeling calm, because soil is a good antidepressant. If you really have a bad day, go out and play in the soil. I mean, kids used to play in the dirt and were happy as could be. We don't let that happen anymore. We must go back to nature. And for that, I hope I have encouraged you enough to at least start somewhere. Start wherever you can. Do as much as you can. Talk to people that are like-minded, and then they'll talk to people, and it'll grow. And so I enjoin you to start like I did. Find your farmer, find your whoever you know around you who's going to be like-minded, and get together and start doing those things that's going to bring us back to nature, which ultimately will bring us back to God, because God created all of this. And so we get back and we give praise. We thank him through our service to others, and it will be we will get it back in kind from others that see what we do and share with us in the same fashion. So I thank you for joining me tonight. I hope you had a little fun with the videos. And as I said, I'll post the link to the full Tucker interview. It's about 2 hours long, but I guarantee you it's 2 hours worth spending, even if you break it up over time. It really tells you a lot of information that maybe you didn't know, or maybe you did know, and this just confirms that this has been the way it's been happening for a long time, and we need it to stop. And the way it's going to stop is with each one of us doing our part. So until next time, God bless.